Hey, how you doing? This is Adam Post, publisher of more than 1,000 comic books. All right, today we're covering how Trump supposedly can't run for president in 2024. That's according to all Democrat Colorado Supreme Court judges. And in the Colorado Supreme Court, all the judges are Democrats. Let's get into the story. Before we do, please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up. I really appreciate you guys. So this ruling is one of probably a number of rulings like this that continue all of the lawfare, all of the attacks on Donald Trump, trying to prevent him from being able to run for president in 2024. Multiple criminal trials, multiple civil trials, who knows what else they'll try. They won't stop. They do not want voters to make the decision on whether or not to vote for Donald Trump, even if they have some plans to do some suspicious things with mail-in ballots or other ways of boosting the vote, legally or illegally. They still don't want to face Donald Trump in any kind of a fair fight. However, they are very well aware that should this get to the Supreme Court, which of course it probably will be appealed to the Supreme Court, which the Democrats have also been attacking the legitimacy of, we'll review this and we'll say, of course, you're not allowed to take Donald Trump off the ballot. It's up for the people to decide who they want to vote for. However, the problem Donald Trump does have is that there are many situations that he's involved in that are going to be brought up into the Supreme Court. The strategy that the Democrats and the establishment Republicans are playing with is to try to get as many cases as possible in front of the Supreme Court, trying to eliminate Donald Trump. Because no matter how reasonable their ruling is, and no matter how obvious it is that the cases and questions being brought to them are an abuse of power by political enemies, there's a limit to the number of times the Supreme Court can make rulings that benefit Donald Trump. If it's 2 times, 3 times, 10 times, there is a number that brings into question the legitimacy of the rulings of the Supreme Court, no matter how much in the right Donald Trump seems to be. And that's the game. The game is push as many things as possible on the Supreme Court that would prevent Donald Trump from being able to run, and then pressure the Supreme Court politically to not do the legal, constitutional, and right thing to do. Let's get into more details on this story. From Deadline, Donald Trump is disqualified from presidency and should be removed from Colorado ballot, state Supreme Court rules. Former President Donald Trump is disqualified from holding the office of president and should not be on Colorado's primary ballot, the state Supreme Court ruled on Tuesday. Would they ever do something like this to a Democrat? Of course they would not. Or to someone who's a preferred Republican candidate. They would never think of doing this. It calls into question the legitimacy of the Colorado Supreme Court. But for Donald Trump, they'll make an exception. The court stayed its ruling until January 4th, subject to an appeal to the U.S. Supreme Court, but their decision foreshadows an election year of twists and turns and fought extensively in the courts. Trump's campaign said that they would appeal. The state justices, all Democrats, in a 4-3 decision, concluded that Trump is disqualified under Section 3 of the 14th Amendment. That section prohibits from office those who, after taking an oath to support the Constitution, have engaged in insurrection or rebellion, which, of course, Donald Trump never did. A group of plaintiffs, all state electors eligible to vote in the Republican primary, had challenged Trump's eligibility, citing his conduct on January 6, 2021, which, of course, is still in dispute. Quote, "We do not reach these conclusions lightly. We are mindful of the magnitude and weight of the decisions now before us. We are likewise mindful of our solemn duty to apply the law without fear or favor and without being swayed by public reaction to the decisions that the law mandates we reach," wrote the Colorado Supreme Court. The court majority concluded that the attack on the Capitol on January 6th was an insurrection, even though it was not, noting that it constituted a concerted and public use of force or threat of force by a group of people to hinder or prevent the U.S. government from taking the actions necessary to accomplish the peaceful transfer of power in this country. They also concluded that Trump engaged in that insurrection, pointing to his conduct before and after the November 2020 election, as well as his speech on January 6th, when he, quote, literally exhorted his supporters to fight at the Capitol, which he did not do. The justices wrote, unsurprisingly, the crowd at the ellipse reacted to President Trump's words with calls for violence. Indeed, after President Trump instructed his supporters to march to the Capitol, Members of the crowd shouted, "Storm the Capitol, invade the Capitol building, and take the Capitol." As our detailed recitation of the evidence shows, President Trump did not merely incite the insurrection. Even when the siege on the Capitol was fully underway, he continued to support it by repeatedly demanding that Vice President Pence refuse to perform his constitutional duty and by calling senators to persuade them to stop the counting of electoral votes. These actions constituted overt, voluntary, and direct participation in the insurrection. Literally no one charged with insurrection. Literally zero. Not Trump, not anyone else. The justices reversed a ruling from a district court which concluded that the clause did not apply to the president. The state Supreme Court ruling applies only to Colorado, but if its opinion were to be upheld by the U.S. Supreme Court, it would likely impact ballot decisions across the country. This ruling, and they're well aware of this, cannot be upheld by the Supreme Court because you can't have states individually deciding who can and can't run for federal offices this way. Otherwise, Republicans could routinely not allow any Democrats to run. You see, it becomes a mess pretty quickly. Other efforts are afoot to prohibit Trump from appearing on the ballot in other states, including Minnesota and Michigan, even though courts have declined to rule that he is disqualified. Stephen Cheung, a spokesman for the Trump campaign, said in a statement, quote, "Unsurprisingly," teasing them by using the same word unsurprisingly, "the all-Democrat appointed Colorado Supreme Court has ruled against President Trump, supporting a Soros-funded left-wing group's scheme to interfere in an election on behalf of crooked Joe Biden by removing Trump's name from the ballot and eliminating the rights of Colorado voters to vote for the candidate of their choice." The 9 federal justices are already poised to consider another consequential case having to do with Trump and the scope of presidential powers, whether he is immune from prosecution on election conspiracy charges related to the January 6th attack. And that is interesting. That hasn't been decided yet. The Supreme Court has decided that they will consider Jack Smith's request to immediately take up Jack Smith's appeal to have the Supreme Court decide whether or not Trump is immune from criminal prosecution. There is no question that while he was president, he's immune from civil prosecution that's already been litigated in other cases before Trump. There is a question of whether or not after a president leaves office, corrupt prosecutors can go and look and try to find things to criminally charge presidents with. One of the plaintiffs, Norma Anderson, former Republican majority leader for the Colorado House and Senate, said in a statement, quote, "My fellow plaintiffs and I brought this case to continue to protect the right to free and fair elections enshrined in our Constitution and to enshrine Colorado Republican primary voters are only voting for eligible candidates. Today's win does just that." President of their group, Noah Bookbinder, said, quote, "Our Constitution clearly states that those who violate their oath by attacking our democracy are barred from serving in government. It has been an honor to represent the petitioners, and we look forward to ensuring that this vitally important ruling stands. The ruling could be stayed longer, and it will be, depending on the timing of the appeal of the Supreme Court." There's another ruling the Supreme Court is looking at, questioning the abuse of Washington, D.C. DOJ prosecutors using a law to saying that the people that were anywhere near the Capitol on January 6th were obstructing an official proceeding. The Supreme Court is now going to be considering as well if that was an abuse of that law because it resembles nothing like what the law was intended for. The law was intended for financial crimes with people corruptly destroying paperwork, preventing the administration of justice. The January 6th prosecutors used the law corruptly themselves, well outside the intention of the law that was passed by Congress. And that's why it's also being challenged. And now that has made it up to the Supreme Court. Of course, Jack Smith has also charged Donald Trump with that and with another count saying that Trump, like everyone else on January 6th, corruptly interfered and obstructed an official proceeding in Congress. The Supreme Court probably wouldn't have taken that up if they weren't going to get rid of that and say, no, that's unconstitutional, which will cause some of its own upheaval. What I expect to see is that the Supreme Court tells this lower Colorado Supreme Court, stay your ruling for a while. They will probably take up the immunity question pretty quickly because the Democrats are creating absolute havoc with the political season, causing mass confusion. And they will probably say, no, you actually can't charge Trump for actions he took involving the election because, one, it's a novel theory. It's not something that's been established as law. Jack Smith is stretching all the laws like crazy to try to prosecute Trump. And 2, any power that anyone in the executive branch would have to do literally anything to do with the elections all comes from the president. When the president is elected and then they are inaugurated, the president actually becomes the executive branch. He's a single person who holds all the power of the executive branch. There is no power in the executive branch that isn't derivative of the president of the United States. While you're the president, you are the executive branch. That is Trump's defense, and it's an excellent defense. There's no way to get around it. Additionally, Trump was impeached by the Congress for the same actions that Jack Smith is trying to persecute him for and prosecute him for. Trump was acquitted by the Senate, meaning he was found not guilty of those things. That question of now being charged criminally for something that he was already acquitted of is also coming up in front of the Supreme Court. If Trump would have been found guilty in the Senate for what Nancy Pelosi impeached him for in the Congress, he would have been removed as president. But not only that, he then also would have been subject to criminal penalties for whatever it was he would have been convicted of in the Senate. So the Democrats and the establishment Republicans are dragging the Supreme Court into their effort to block Trump from being able to run for president. I think he'll win. I think he'll beat them. He sees things like 10 steps ahead. So we'll have to see where this goes, and I will cover it on my channel. Let me know what you think of all this in the comments below. Always love to see your ideas. Please be sure you are subscribed to the channel. Click the bell for notifications. Give me a thumbs up, and I'll see you again soon with another video. And if I don't see you, I will miss you.